time blocking in Notion just got a whole lot easier. Notion has really been working on leveling up the integrations between Notion databases and Notion Calendar, and now you can not only drag and drop things from your Notion databases onto your calendar, but they have made task management a breeze as well. Let's go ahead and take a peek. If you've been around here for a while, this video is actually an update of my previous time blocking method that I was using in Notion before. I had actually built my own drag and drop system inside of Notion, but now that is not necessary because that happens in Notion Calendar. So before we hop into Notion Calendar, I want to quickly share with you what my general planning process is if you don't already know, so that everything makes sense once we get into Notion Calendar. So this page is my weekly planning page. This is where I brain dump all of my tasks and kind of organize what is going on with my tasks. So on this page, I have a place to brain dump my thoughts over here. I can either put them into the notes, or I can just go ahead and stick them straight into the task dump here if I already know what it is I want to do. So what that looks like is I typically just press one of these buttons to get me started on a new task. I go ahead and fill out all of this information, and then it gets sorted into the rest of my database here. So either ends up in the top priorities, which is pretty much anything that's going to happen in the next week, or it's going to end up in the someday section, which is down here, and that's anything after the next week. So something that I do that is a little bit different is I have two due dates. One is my ideal due date, and the other is the actual DO due date. The reason I have this in place is so that I can still sort by date, but I am not necessarily assigning myself things way out in advance. So the idea here is that the top priorities are all of the things that ideally I would be doing within the next week. And then someday is things that are ideally going to be past that next week. So this isn't at all dictated by the actual due date. This is all ideal due date here. Now, what I used to do is I used to drag from this week's list right here, all the things that I ideally would want to do this week, and I would drag it into this view of this week ahead. And I had these next to each other so I could easily do that. But what I actually do now is I use this as a reference just to see what is going on for the week and make sure that still makes sense for me. And then I can actually use these as references because we will actually do the dragging and dropping in Notion Calendar now. So in order to do that in Notion Calendar, what we actually need to do is make sure our database is connected to our Notion Calendar. Now there's a really easy way to do that. If you have a calendar view already, you can just press this button up here at the top that says Manage in Calendar, and it will import that view into Notion Calendar for you. But for me, this view is actually showing me things that are on the actual due date, the DO due date, not the ideal due date. And what I really wanted was for Notion Calendar to know what I ideally wanted to do, so then I can drag and drop those in. So that's actually looking at the weekly list here, but there's no button for Notion Calendar. So what do? There's actually a new little feature that if you click on this view, you can go ahead and say Manage in Calendar. So you don't need a calendar view anymore in order to get it imported into Notion Calendar, which makes things so much easier. And you can be very specific about the filters and everything that is showing from the Notion Calendar side. So here we are in Notion Calendar. And once we get our database imported into Notion Calendar, there's a couple of things we want to first get set up before we can start the actual drag and drop process. So first off, you'll want to come over here to the sidebar where you can find your databases, click these three dots, and what we're going to want to do is change our primary properties. Now this is really just to double check that it is pulling in the correct properties that you want to be the primary in Notion Calendar. So for example, I want to make sure that my required date property is the due date instead of the ideal due date, because I do actually want to be scheduling these out on the day that I want to do them. And then my status property is going to be my done status, but you can actually choose checkboxes. So if you use a checkbox to mark whether or not something is done, you can go ahead and set that up here too. Once we've done that, we'll just go ahead and confirm, and that will set everything up on the Notion Calendar side of things. Now to actually start the drag and drop process to schedule out tasks, what we can do is just click on this view of the tasks here, and then it'll pull up this nice little sidebar where you can actually start the process of dragging and dropping. Now, I have my settings configured here to make sure that I am only seeing the things that haven't been scheduled, and it's actually sorting by my ideal due date. So in order to do that, we're gonna first come up here into our settings and double check a few things. So you can change the color here. You can see the visible properties, but it is important to note that this does need to be changed on the Notion side of things. So as you'll see here, it won't let you do anything, but it will say that you need to go into Notion to configure the property of visibility. So just in the view that you import into Notion, be sure to go there, and then you can set up the properties that you want to be visible, and it will also show here in Notion Calendar. The same thing goes for the sort. So I actually have mine sorted by the ideal due date so that it is ascending, and I can see what is the most pressing thing to get done first. So if you want to set that up, be sure to do that in Notion. Now you also have the option to group, and it actually does let you do that from here. So if you have a status property at the moment, it's going to be a little bit more robust as they continue to add support for different property types. But right now you can group by the done status or your checkboxes here if you have some set up. I personally don't have that turned on because if we do turn that on, as you can see, it's actually pulling in the done status twice. I actually don't have the done status showing on my Notion database. It forces you to have that showing here in Notion Calendar, which is kind of annoying. So if you do group it by that, you're gonna see the status twice. And to me, that's a little bit redundant and I don't need to see that. And on top of it, most of my stuff is already not started anyway. So that's kind of not really helpful for me. So I just keep the grouping off. But you can also make sure that the status is incomplete. So that again is showing the things that haven't been finished. And then you'll also want to double check that your date is unscheduled. If you choose to show all, it's going to pull in all of your tasks that you haven't done yet. And for this specific view, I want to specifically see the ones that aren't scheduled yet. So you can kind of play around with these views to make sure that it fits your workflow. So for me, again, this is showing the tasks that I ideally want to be doing right now, and I can go ahead and schedule those to the due date using this method. Something else I really like about this is that I can see my tags really easily. This is something I actually struggled with when I had my previous setup in Notion. It was a little bit hard to see what was going on when I was dragging and dropping from my list into my calendar. And so I can see these very easily right here and kind of keep that in mind as I'm scheduling tasks out to make sure I'm not doing things that are a bunch of deep work or a bunch of 60+ minute tasks in one day, because that is a lot of work. So I do enjoy the visibility of the properties here. It makes things a lot easier for me. So now to drag and drop, all we need to do is grab our cards that are showing over here, drag them onto the calendar, and then you can adjust the time and date a little bit if you need. You can always re-drag and drop it, or you can just go ahead and grab the bottom and drag it out for how long you think that specific task is going to take you. And that's how easy it is to time block now onto your Notion calendar. So as you can see, dragging that here actually scheduled it to my due date. And so now it is showing as a scheduled task instead of an unscheduled one. So we can go ahead and do the same thing for this guy here and schedule this one out. I know this one is probably not going to take me quite as long, so I won't make it as long of a task, but it really is that easy to get things into your calendar this way. So I have pretty much already planned out my week here. I had a couple examples to show, but now that we are finished with this, we can go ahead and click on the My Tasks view again, and that's just going to close that sidebar for us. Now, if you like to manage your tasks from your calendar as well, kind of similar to Google Tasks, you can now do that too. So for example, this video that I'm filming right now, I can go ahead and mark this in progress from Notion Calendar. I don't have to be in Notion to do so, which is pretty cool. And I actually also have this set up so that it is a filtered view. If I mark this done, it will actually disappear from my calendar view. It does take a little bit of time to sync and update, but then it keeps my calendar clear going forward. Now, if we click on these tasks and see all of the available properties over here, you're going to notice that there are some that actually aren't supported yet, and Notion is working on getting all of the properties supported. So right now I can only see my little select tags over here, the status, checkboxes, and ideal due date. So they have dates, checkboxes, select, and status, but they are going to be adding all of the other properties eventually. So kind of keep your eye out. They're going to be slowly rolling out. Overall, I am very excited about this update with Notion Calendar. I think this is a really big step in actually integrating the two apps a little bit better, and I'm really excited to see where they take this. I'm actually really enjoying this addition to Notion Calendar because it's created a more natural way to do what I was already doing in Notion anyway. Let me know if you're going to be using these new features down below in the comments. In my next video, we're going to be diving into the world of Notion database automations and how you can start using them in your workspace. It is going to be a fun one, so be sure to subscribe and turn on your post notifications so you don't miss it. But for now, if you want to learn more about Notion's companion apps like Notion Calendar, be sure to check out my video on Notion Mail, so that way you can go ahead and use the full app suite together. I will see you in the next one.